Very good afternoon, friends. Welcome to this webinar on strengthening donor engagement, jointly organized by the COC and SUSS as part of the Charities Lean Forward webinar series. My name is Caroline from SUSS SR Naden School of Human Development. It's a delight to see so many of you and so many familiar faces, and I'm privileged to host 4 distinguished speakers on your behalf today. Before I hand the time over to the Commissioner of Charities, Mr. Desmond Chin, allow me to give a quick introduction. Today's topic on strengthening donor engagement is timely. The change introduced by COVID-19 has affected how we raise funds, forcing many of us to review and revise our donor engagement strategies. Some of us also learned that putting up a fundraising campaign online is only half the puzzle, and there has to be accompanying internal processes and structures for monitoring and reporting. So going forward, we anticipate trends in giving and philanthropy to shift towards structured giving that is more strategized, sustainable, and impactful. So how might charities lean forward to embrace such trends and overcome these challenges? And how might charities and non-profits demonstrate the impact that they are making? How might impact measures be used to benchmark against organizational goals? And how might impact and performance measures enhance our accountability to donors, to funders, and public at large? These are strategic questions that will take more than a day to discuss. However, to give us tips and insights from this topic, we are privileged to have Dr. Richard Yap, a social impact advocate. And you are in for a treat too, because besides Dr. Yap, Dr. Ang Hak Seng, Deputy Secretary of the Ministry of the Culture and Community and Youth, and Mr. Tim Lee, Executive Director of Caregiver Alliance, will join us in a panel discussion to share practical insights. So today's agenda, first and foremost, there will be an opening address by the COC. Dr. Richard Yap will then followed by his presentation on impact measurement for charities and non-profits. And the third agenda item today is a panel discussion and Q&A. Right. During the webinar registration, we had asked you to share with us the reason why you are signing up for today's webinar, and we used your inputs to shape the presentation as well as the panel discussion. So thank you for co-creating the webinar content with us. Regardless, you may still have questions, so I urge you, any questions that you have, just use the chat function to input them, and we will draw the questions during the panel discussion. So without further delay, I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Desmond Chin, the Commissioner of Charities, to deliver for us the opening address. Desmond was appointed as the Commissioner of Charities on 1st November 2020. Many of you know Mr. Chin from the breakthrough that he has achieved through the Captains of Lives initiatives. So may I now invite Desmond to deliver his opening address for us. Desmond, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Desmond, and thank you for joining us today. It's my great pleasure to be here, and I want to express my deepest appreciation to SUSS for co-organizing this webinar with us. As the new Commissioner of Charity, I really look forward to be able to know all of you better so that we can together build a trusted and thriving charity sector. Today, there are almost, I think there are over 200 charities attending this webinar. It is a clear testimony of the strong interest on this topic of strengthening donor engagement. In this COVID-19 battered economy, the impact on charities have been mixed, and with more beneficiaries to care for, some charities have suffered due to fewer donations, while others were able to harness the collective energy to cultivate partnerships and to raise more funds. As an example of a charity strengthening its partnership is a charity in the social and welfare sector called the Children's Wishing Well. After COVID-19 started and all physical programs were suspended, this particular charity had to innovate quickly and the programs and partnered with Amazon to create a donation registry on their shopping website. The beneficiaries could pick whatever items they needed to be added to the registry, and shoppers on the website could then help to pay and check out the items to donate to the beneficiaries. The donors could decide and knew exactly what their donation was for, while the beneficiaries also received exactly what they wanted. By riding on technology, the charity was able to reach out to more beneficiaries despite the circuit breaker limitations. Donors today are seeking greater transparency as to how their donations are being spent. They want to be able to decide which specific programs or even which specific beneficiary their donations can be set aside for. Thus, it is increasingly more important that donor engagement goes beyond engaging just the donors, but also the charity should consider all the stakeholders, which include our donors, our volunteers, and our beneficiaries, and how beneficial collaboration can be created by all parties. To foster long-lasting relationships, engagement must be authentic and consistent, with regular updates on how donations are being utilized and how the lives of beneficiaries are being impacted. Donors are more likely to continue their support for a charity when they share the same beliefs and values of that charity, and they have a good giving experience and emotional connect with the charity as well. With strong engagement experience and correspondingly support from stakeholders, charities can also receive greater assurance that they have constant, reliable sources of donation and volunteers to pursue their mission and their vision. Charities may now ask how they can engage their donors, especially when the usual face-to-face engagements have been hampered because of COVID-19. Now, this is where charities need to rethink and get creative with their communication and engagement methods. They could enlist the help of digital and social media to communicate with donors. There are free and low-cost applications that charity may tap on, such as using the social media planning app to plan and schedule relevant content to highlight the charity's mission and activities, as well as to showcase how donors and volunteers are making a difference in the community through the charity's programs. Such tools also enable charities to gather new volunteers and like-minded people to share on a common cause. For example, the Straits Times featured a recent fundraising dinner, which was organized via Zoom and had raised over $500,000 for projects that meet the needs of vulnerable groups in society. Food were delivered to the donors, and they were able to enjoy the food while watching performances online together. Regular and timely communication via various mediums is also a good practice for charities to demonstrate authenticity and to let their donors know that they care about them and not just about their donations. It's also essential to close the loop with donors because all donors matter and we must always thank them properly. Where relevant and appropriate, charities should also share testimonials from the beneficiaries. This will help to strengthen the donors' giving experience and enable them to witness that their contributions are appreciated and that they have made a meaningful impact. It will be challenging to keep track of many donors and create individualized engagement. To facilitate such efforts, charities can consider utilizing existing technologies or systems such as the customer relationship management to develop and monitor the engagement plan with donors. Charities are not alone on this journey. We have been collaborating with various partners like SUSS to organize the Charity Lean Forward webinars. We hope that through these webinars, charities will gain latest insights that will help them to operate effectively during this very difficult period. Some topics covered previously are also relevant to donor engagement, such as data protection for charities and fundraising online for charities. If any of you happen to miss the earlier sessions, you can watch the replays of these webinars online via the links provided on the charity portal. I've been watching some of these before I became the COC, just to get myself familiarized as well. We also strongly encourage charities to tap on the VWO Charities Capability Fund, which includes a training grant that supports board members and key staff to attend training courses related to fundraising management and communications on social media. This is currently an important form of communication with stakeholders, as more people are using digital tools to share information and to connect with others. Under this ICT grant, there is also funding support of up to $30,000 per charity to support charities in their digitalization efforts. And these include solutions for customer relationship management, cybersecurity, and donor management. So please do utilize these grants as they are available to you. Let me thank you once again for taking time off today to join us. I hope you will have a robust discussion with our experienced speaker and distinguished panelists. Do interact, ask questions, share your thoughts and your feedback, and then we can learn together and better understand the needs of your charity. I wish all of you a very fruitful day. Thank you for joining us, and I'm very happy to meet all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, COC. Now let us move on to our next item on our agenda. So our speaker today is Dr. Richard Yap. I know Dr. Yap because both of us are volunteers at the same hospice charity organization. So one of the graduate courses I teach at SUSS NSHD is about social impact measurement. So when I was first introduced to him, I was especially excited because he is a social impact advocate. And before he turned into a social impact advocate, Dr. Yap was a banker and fund manager. His passion is far-ranging. It ranges from financial inclusiveness to youth empowerment. Today, he advises impact businesses with their business strategy, revenue models, and financial planning. So Dr. Yap has over 25 years of international experience in banking and investment. He has a doctorate of business administration from the City University of Hong Kong, where his thesis was based on the grounded theory on the social impact landscape in Hong Kong. Dr. Yap was based in Hong Kong for many years before returning to Singapore with his family. And in case you're wondering, he's a Singaporean. And today he will be presenting for us his presentation titled Impact Measurements for Charities and Nonprofits. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you very much, Caroline, for your introduction. And I also want to thank Desmond, the Commission of Charity, and SUSS for hosting this webinar. So as Caroline says, I spent most of my career actually in the commercial world. But about 10 years ago, I got on the journey when I was working for a family office, and we're looking from a philanthropic perspective of exploring passive giving. So passive giving to them is philanthropy, to active giving. So what does active giving mean? Active giving essentially is about working with companies, social companies, companies that have a social mission. So this, it can be social enterprise, it can be for-profit companies, but they are companies that do a nature business. And depending on the product and services that they provide and the recipient that they touch. So it can be, as what Desmond was talking about, is the stakeholder, right? It can be the beneficiaries, a targeted group, and how is their work transforming their life? So I got really excited over that, and so 10 years ago I started volunteering into that space, working a lot as a mentor, helping those companies, working with them, and hence built a lot of case studies, which actually formulated the basis of the thesis that I actually prepared. Having said that, I think every company should be a social company. Every company should have a social mission in the mission statement of their business. All companies should have a social mission because these days companies are increasingly moving away from pure profit maximization to a stakeholder view, because we are dealing with consumer. We're dealing with companies are dealing with engagers that are younger, and younger people, the millennials, are more social conscious. And it's no longer the case where only social companies need to worry about social. So to cut a long story short, I then spent a lot of time trying to basically see how one social enterprise is doing better than the others. I'm always putting a hat on as a portfolio managers. So when I'm looking at a social enterprise that deal with elderly issue vis-a-vis a social enterprise dealing with youth and another dealing with education, the performance matrix can be very different. So the whole idea is that how do we actually stack them up, and that this is an impact measurement is one that really caught my attention. I spent quite a lot of time actually studying it. So today I hope to share what I've found that works for social enterprise. And since returning back to Singapore, I have been, as Caroline says, I've been volunteering with a number of charity, and hopefully, to share some of what I've seen from a commercial perspective, and what it is applicable, that is also applicable in a non-profit charity setting as well. So I hope that today's session can be informational, and I hope that you can go back with some handy tool that you can use. Now we go to the next slide, where I think we have a poll. There is no right or wrong answer on this poll. It is basically a sense of trying to understand where you believe your donors actually give, and I see that majority actually support the mission giving. And I think this is this means that your organization is actually doing a good job in this case. Done the poll. This is exactly the same survey that was done by a U.S. Charity organization, and they survey about 3,000 donors. So that came from the donors rather than the social enterprise. And this is exactly what they have ranked. So essentially, donors are looking for charities and non-profits that align with what the social causes that they want to achieve. Now, I think not many of you have chose number 2, or you have it was a slightly lower number. But I think number 2s are equally important. Trusting the organization means that they have to know your organization well. It's just like what Desmond was talking about earlier. It is not just about meeting your donors a year at a time. It is very much a relationship building exercise, that they have to be involved in knowing what you have been doing, in knowing what the impact that you have been creating, the project that you have been doing, so that it is a much longer term exercise to create that brand awareness, that trust. So it can be on a one basis. It can also be done on a massive basis, where there's a lot of recognition of the name, such as the Red Cross, for example. When you tell people that you're from the Red Cross, people know exactly what the organization is about. Having said that, because non-profits, charities are in a public domain sectors, so the news is important. So in terms of how you govern yourself, become even more important. So these are a reason why measuring and impact is in terms of governing yourself is something that we have to look at as well. So among all the 7 items that you guys have picked, I think most of it are consistent with what what the surveys, the public surveys have actually shown. So let's talk about, okay. So what stops donors from giving? I think we talked about that just now. When there's a bad rap and when there's a bad publicity that's out there, it is something that will significantly affect an organization. But most importantly, I think donors create doubts when they do not know where the money is actually going to. So donors, particularly, I think you have been questioned a lot of times. So what is your mean ratio? How much of the money that we actually kind of granted or donated actually goes into helping the end user, the end recipient, rather than paying on the emissions on the administration side? Now, it is not that you do not know the importance of the corporate office. So it's like what it says earlier. It is important for you then that to maintain that open dialogue, to have that continuation, to know to let you know the importance of the corporate office, the investment that you need to make in technologies, in getting professional staff to execute the work that you wanted to do. So that being said, what does donor wanted to do to know? This is basically an extraction from a philanthropist magazines that what donors wanted to look at, and that was based on the article that was done in 2018. So as we says, let's go down the list, right? So as it says, financial pictures is one that's important. How organization spend your money. Again, the dialogue going back to your donor side important. Legitimacy means is the organization well governed? Does it have a a supervisory board over it? Now, and this actually gives donors a certain confidence. Now, when we talk about organization ABC, this is basically talking about donors want to know what is your mission. Donors wanted to know where you are allocating, where you're helping, and how are you executing this group of mission that you wanted to achieve. What are the strategy? What are the plans? So and that includes how many staff that you have and how actively. So it's probably about quite a lot of. It probably will require you to have some breadth and depth in terms of cost. So it is not good just to tell people we serve 1,000 people, and you have to say, for 1,000 of these people, how many of these are critical patient, for example, how many of this require more times, and what are the differences that you make in this case. And I think today's topic is about impact. Now, among all these items, let's talk about transparencies and data security. These days, data breaches is all over, and whether you are charities or not, you are also vulnerable to that. And donors are actually very mindful of that. About a month ago, I think I shared somewhere that there was a data companies that manage a CRM for a number of charities in the US, and they have been hacked into, and a lot of the donors' information has gone missing. So those are things that will actually draw people's attention and raise the eyebrow. Transparency, again, is about how willing and how ready are you in terms of reflecting not just your work, but about, in data security. How do you actually deal with that situation? How do you actually react to that? And how do you share that, communicate that, and the ramification in terms of the action that you did? So those are equally important. Now, today's topic is about organization impact. And so what we'll be doing a lot is about how do you define impact in this case? And essentially, impact, in my sense, is about, in fact, in a non-profit charity sense, it's actually very straightforward. It's whether your mission is a success in this case. Now, whether your mission is a success requires certain methodologies and certain ways to actually be able to hold yourself accountable, right? So you know that you are doing certain work. For example, you are helping kind of marginalized students, just helping them in their to improve their academic standard. Now, how do you the outcome measurement is actually very simple, very straightforward. Performance measurements actually deals more with how effective are you in executing this process? What is the long-term effect in terms of helping the kids? Are you seeing results from that? And I think sometimes this performance measurement is a good way, not just to look at whether your mission is a success, but it is a good way for yourself and management in a company, in an organization, in a non-profit, in a charity, to know how well your organization is doing. You can actually use it to benchmark against other your peers. You can use it to benchmark against your budget. So everyone have a budget. You can use it to benchmark against how well you're really doing against your own resources and capacity. So it is a tool from my perspective, impact measurement, not just for donor, but very much so for management of a company as well. It really helps you to look at how you guys, how is the work being done. So it can be a good management tool for monitoring yourself, and it can be a good management tool for operation efficiencies. It can be a good management tool for onward strategy. So all in all, it is used as a evaluation in this case. Now, why should you care about impact measurement in this case? So this brings back to the earlier point that we talked about. It is about making yourself, just really to see whether you are really doing what you have set up to do. And I think in Singapore, the biggest in Singapore is usually the government, either the ministries or government-supported charity, and likewise, they would want to know that how well you as a charity, as a social enterprise, has been doing as they farm up capital for donation purposes. Now, the purpose of impact measurement, as we talk about, also provide greater transparency, not just to the donors, but to your staff, to yourself, and to the staff that's working for you as well. So it gives them a sense, it gives the people who works for you a sense of, they know whether their contribution and their work has been rightly rewarded. A lot of people who work in the social service sectors are doing it not just for money, definitely not doing it for money, but for the passion. And if you create that transparency, you help them to know if their work is being done. I think finally, it is also about creating accountability. Accountability to the donors, accountability to people who works for you, to the volunteers, and also to your staff. Now, we are going to go more. So the slides before really tells you about what's the purpose and why are we doing impact measurement. But from now on, from the slides following, we are actually going to go and be more basically, it's going to be a way for you to think about how can you do measurement. So I hope that you can take out a piece of paper and pen, or if you can, type down. These are some of the things that we'll be doing, right? And there'll be some case studies if possible. Then we can see how how this session has been, whether it is meaningful for you. So I did say that we want this event to be more interactive. I'm just thinking about with 200 over participants, how are we going to get interaction up here? But we'll see how we go. Now let's. There's a few things that we have to remember. So we always talk about your organization mission. So if you can do for me, please take out a piece of paper and pen and write down your organization mission. Now, a lot of people know your organization mission, but if you want clear ideas about where your organization mission is, you should go to your website. And typically, it is spelled over there, and it's very clear. It's about who and what you are trying to service. You can also go to the organization bylaw, and typically in their annual report, they will spell out the mission and strategy and stakeholder. Now, I put a slash between stakeholders and beneficiary. So stakeholders are a lot more. Stakeholders include the beneficiary, it includes your employees, it also includes your volunteers. And to a certain extent, to a broader extent, it also includes your service provider and your donors as well. So for that, you should understand that that triangle in terms of who the stakeholders is, and obviously who you are trying to provide the services to. Now, the third question, so those two questions are very factual, so it's very easy to find. The third question is a bit, will require you to do a bit more work. So how do you know if you have fulfilled your mission? Can you tell, without, just out, from what you, just from recollection, do you have a clear strategy? Do you have a clear objective of what you're doing? Because it helps you with that. It helps you to identify key indicators. It helps you to know what to look up for. And that comes into collecting information. Now, there's a lot of information to collect along the way. And in fact, we live in a world that is overwhelmingly too many information. And we have to be careful in such a way to not spend too much time on it. Because I believe that you guys are in a nonprofit, in a charity, resources are limited, and most of your resources are allocated to servicing the beneficiary. So, so it is important to know your objective and strategy in order to carve out what you need to collect along the way. Now, and after collecting the information, you have to know, what is the data telling you? What is how do I process that information? How can that information help you in that case? Helping you doesn't mean that just sending it to the donors and telling them. It's like what he says, help you from running your organization to look for gaps and leak and things that that you are not you're not fulfilling, that you're actually missing. These are actually as important as telling the good news as well. So then the feedback and actions is also equally important, because it tells you what are the things that you need to fix, but at the same time you can also share about celebrating some of the successes that you've done, and you can also basically be more specific in terms of knowing how your how all this work that you've done is actually making it quantifiable and accountable. So now this is a very good diagram to have, and this is actually modified from the theory of change, and it is something that has been used a lot in the social impact space. That's basically what we talked about earlier, right? Identifying your mission, knowing your stakeholders, is basically the design, basically the structure of your organization. So we will keep that in mind, and you should, if you can, take a snapshot about this this page, and we'll use it to solve some case studies later on. Activity is very straightforward. Activities is all about what you do. So whether you are in palliative care, whether you are in nursing home, whether you're running a non-profit school for disabled kids, whether you are doing ex-offenders regeneration back into society, these are the activities that you do. So in this column, you have to put down, basically identify what is the social objective that we're trying to do for all these activities, and how are we tracking them, right? Do you track it by time? Do you track it by numbers? And those tends to be what I call a very generic tracking, but you have to have a system to do that. And from a result from activities is output. Now there is a difference between output and outcome. Now let's focus on output. So outputs are definitely very quantifiable. So these are numbers of people that you touches, number of hours that you have contributed to taking care of certain patient. It is what we call first level data. Second level data are typically outcome, and outcomes can be there are a lot more, and you can even break it down to first level outcome, second level outcome, third level outcome. And outcome typically are less quantifiable. And so, for example, in this case, this example that we're using basically teaches kids in a low-income community. So an outcome for that could be a better academic score, doing better in school. They are getting into university. The more of them going to university. So these are still quantifiable. Not so quantifiable means the change in their life, and that tends to be much longer term, that you can't measure within a year or two, and typically it stretches out to 6 or 9 years. And typically when you run a longer term programs, these are things that you can manage. So for some of your organization that has been running this charities for the last 30 to 50 years, you can actually collect some of this data by going back to some of your alumni and find out, have there been any change socially, economically to their life? How has your intervention, how has your help improved and changed your life? Those are important information as well. Now, so the result for this, the output and outcomes, basically turn into measurable data, and it feed back into. Look at the gap, right? The arrows that bring you back into the design. Now, then you can ask a question, right? Okay, am I targeting the right group of people? Do we need to change our approach slightly to cater to the right, to ensure that we actually achieve the right outcome for the beneficiary that we care about? So it is a good feedback mechanism in this case. And this is actually a diagram that a lot of people use in impact investing, and I believe it is also a very good diagram to use in your case. The main reasons it create a cause and effect. So it's action and there's an outcome. So later on, we'll talk about one of the measurement mechanism that relies on something like that. Now, the feedback, we can talk a little bit about that. So feedback allows you to ask a question based on the outcome and output that you have as a result come up with. We really targeted at the beneficiary that we wanted to, or we just kind of providing it to the wrong group of people. Who are the people who actually get our as a result benefited from our activities? So things like this is important to you, and the result, as we said, does it help them? So you wanted to, as we said earlier on, there's a lot of data. So you want to be able to think about, sit down with your team, think about what you want to measure, and think about what's important, and not try to over collect too much information and then waste a lot of time and require a lot of people to do that. And also you have to determine what kind of time horizon. So in the earlier case where you're dealing with education, so that's actually a lot more straightforward, because traditional education goes on a calendar timeline. So it's typically January to December. So the time horizon, at the end of the year, you know exactly the result. But for the term outcome, you can always revisit the same group of people 3 to 5 years down the road. And we talk about how does the activities, how does all this thing feed back into to you asking your question, is my activities, is my strategy, is my resources allocation. So this is something that as a nonprofit, you are always struggling with. We have X amount of people, how can I utilize these people effectively to get the maximum outcome? So this allows you to measure, it allows you to know where you stand. And so collecting information is important. We talk about there's so much information out there, and we want to be able to know what is important to you. So it is worth the time as to sit down as a management team to work with your operation, to work with volunteers, to work with your operation team, to basically trash out what kind of KPIs that you wanted to track. Make it achievable, right? And not try to not set a plan that is too grand, right? Make a simple step and make it achievable, because you can always tweak it, you can always improve on it as you go along. So this is part of designing a meaningful process to collect this information, and creating meaningful process means that as you so I've seen how some of this charity and nonprofit what they do is that the people who administer these services are actually indirectly collecting that information by their own feedback. So the nurses went out to administer to a patient, they came back to fill out a form. So in that process, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. There's information that's already captured in there. So how can you extract the information from that process? Technology has also been used actively these days to track and information. So, and I guess it is. I just want to re-emphasize that collecting usable information and not be too over ambitious is important in this case. And then apply. So after collecting all this information, it is important to know how does that translate? Now, this is an important part because when you're able to translate what you've done into a numbers, a story, I would say a methodology that's been widely adopted, it creates credibility, right? It creates credibility for you when you talk to your donors, when you talk to people interested about your organization and would like to help, whether by monetary return or by volunteering their time. Now, I've selected two. There's so many impact measurement methods, but I selected two because I find that this is probably the most widely adopted around the impact investment work. And I thought, based on what we discussed, it's also relevant. Now, remember the diagram that we had just now, right? Where we talked about the activities, the output outcome, and the feedback into the design. Now, so that diagram is called Curve of Change, and basically it's a tool to help people determine the cause and effect of activities. So SROI stand for social return on investment. So as you can tell from the word, it's very quantitative, right? And so we've organized some videos that will actually run through the explanation. The next example that we wanted to show is basically how a balanced scorecard is being used by a hospital, which is a non-profit organization. So I believe most of you know what a balanced scorecard is about. How can you use balanced scorecard? There is very much a management tool in a social organization context. So I thought this is a very good example, and we will take a look at this. So we have seen the video explanation of SROI as well as how a balanced scorecard can be used. Now, there are many resources that's available. You don't have to use this two method, but there are many different methods. And you can use a combination of the two methods as well. The example that I list on this slide, Robinhood is a social enterprise that set up some hedge fund, but they have their own version of Matrix. And if you look at there's a video link on that, so we will not go through it. But if you're on your free time, you can actually explore that. Basically, it's very similar to the SROI model that we saw. So they basically take SROI and they kind of fit in based on their own requirement, and they come up with a certain approach. So yes, you can develop your own approach as long as you can you have well documented it, you have a process to support it, and I think most importantly, it is about how you use it. So Acumen is a well-known social impact fund. It functions like a non-profit totally. They use a balanced scorecard, and their balanced scorecard models is a lot more elaborative than the one that we just saw on the video. Given the time, we're not able to go through how you actually apply that. But these are very much example, and there are links and resources that you can go, you can check it out. Now, let me just take a bit of time to explain the good thing and bad thing about using some of this. The SRI model is one that is very much favored by most government. I know that the Australian government, the UK government, that uses it to benchmark against the performance in the third sectors. Now, SRIs is good if you want in numbers, but as we know, certain activities, if you go back to the graph again, right? Certain activities is very hard to quantify the numbers. How do you actually quantify the number of students doing well in a as a result from nutrition of taking care of them. How do you assign $1 value to that? So again, that requires effort to measure that. And is that really what you want to do? And how do you measure? How you are going to be asked how independent your assumption is as well. So there's many different processes. So sometimes it is probably better if the government actually do it, just like the case in UK and Australia, because they probably have a much broader data set and a broader result, knowing the implication of literate and illiterate. So again, balanced scorecard is also one that involves a lot of effort and people to do. As we can see, there's 4 elements to that, dealing with internal, operational, financial, most importantly, your staff, and your external, meaning your beneficiaries, your volunteers, your service provider, and that is also a massive exercise. So I would say is that selection of all these things is good and important, but you want to pick one that's that makes sense for you, or I see some participant was asking whether SUSS actually provide that. Maybe Caroline should actually think about providing that as a service as well for the social enterprise. Now, I actually picked a case study, but I'm not sure how are we going to be able to do an interactive session. But let me take a step back and introduce you this company that I work with. Now, this company is known as Plus Education Foundation, and they're based in Hong Kong. So I work with them when I get to know that they are a non-profit organization that really help kids who didn't make it to the regular program. They fall out from the education program. So these are kids who probably didn't finish high school, can't make it to college, or they came from a broken family and can't afford to go back into school. There are many other reasons. So basically, they target those kids who fall out from the system. It's basically, so their objective is to reach out to these kids. So these are the beneficiaries, and their objective is to give them a skill set that they can basically create a value for themselves. So the company actually teaches them how to design. So it's basically a graphics company, and the founders of this company used to work for a CGI company in Hong Kong and in the States. So they basically design animation for movies, for TV's production and things like that. So they have a lot of wealth of technical expertise. They have a lot of industry contacts, and they are definitely they know what they're doing, and they have the heart to help these kids. So it's very clear. The activity is really to teach kids skill set so that they can be employable. Who probably traditionally can't find a job or have to work in a blue collar workers, so they're not living up to their potential. So this is basically the case. Now, because they are such a small company, the output is not a lot. The output is very much determined by the capacity in the office that they can have. So they rented a place where they actually conduct a lot of this exercise it is drawing, it is computerized drawing, it is about learning how to do animation online, things like that. So its limitation is very much limited to the space that they can use to teach the kids, the amount of computers that they have, that they are equipped with, the amount of software that they can buy, and the amount of teachers that they can find. So to a certain extent, their outputs are constrained in that sense. Now, I've seen a lot of this. I've seen a lot of this NGOs and charity teach kids how to cook, the kids how to how to do certain things, in the hope that they can change their life from the old ways. Now, what falls short a lot of time is always placement. So kids can't go. It's great to train them, but they can't get a job after that. And unfortunately, when you have devious kids, youth who are kind of by the wayside of the law, they're motivated. They went to get training, but when they came out, very quickly, their old circles of friends and contacts will actually kind of reach out to them, and they fall back into their old habits again. So getting a job is actually as equally important in this kind of setting. So for Act Plus, I thought this is really good about them because of their industry contacts, and they have been a professional before in this space, so they are able to take job. So while the kids are actually in school, the teachers get commercial contract jobs, and they bring it to the kids, and they says, let's work on this together, and when they get paid, the kids get paid alongside with that. So you go to school for free, and you actually earn money alongside. But what is more important is that they actively help place these kids once they graduate. So many of these kids end up working in advertising firm where graphics design is required. Many of these kids also end up working for CGI's company, and some of these kids actually end up working in certain tech company where design is important as well. So you can see a great transformation in the kids' life once they have the boost, the jump, the foot in the door into those organizations. I attended one of the sharing where a employers was sharing how hesitant he is when he was being approached by the founders of this NGO to this nonprofit to take one of the graduate because he didn't want to deal with problems kids, questionable behavior and things like that, so there was a lot of doubts, right? But he was willing to take the chance. As we learn, a lot of companies, a lot of business people have a social heart. Wanted to help. I think that's something that we didn't cover in this lecture, but I observed that in many circumstances. So on a one-on-one basis, they says we'll take these kids in just for trial, and this kid end up working there, and it has been 3 years, and the employer was sharing how independent the kids is, how well trained they are, and how productive and innovative these kids have brought to his business as well. So this is transformational because it gives hope to a group that probably is not will not do well in a very highly competitive society, challenging. So think about that, right? From this story, I mean, how can we quantify some of these things, right? And I think essentially, if you go back to the feedback loop, think about how we're going to communicate that, right? Management of this company is about how can they scale it. It is a limitation about how can they scale it, and this is something that in Singapore we don't have to worry about because we have ITE, and I also work with ITE, and I realized that they are in exactly doing some of these activities as well. So it's a good thing. Now, I hope that this case study is real, and it has also been useful to think about. Now, we're not over yet. We're almost 2 slides to the end. So I hope that to keep you guys entertained and also making sure that it is relevant. Now, transparency again is very important. You know, there are other things about collecting data. There are other things about measuring impact. Now you need to tell the story, right? You need to tell a story, and you need to kind of put it across, and you need to kind of show to people what you have been doing. So this, you have to answer this 3 questions, right? Who are you, trying to show to, So you have to evaluate, right? Your stakeholder who cares about this analysis. Most likely the donors, right? But grants giver, volunteers, members, even your employees as well, and maybe your customers in that case. But most importantly, it has to be targeted, right? Then why are you doing? Why are we doing this? Right? So you think that why do you think that they care about it? It is about it is also, as we said earlier on, it creates performance measurement, right? Performance management. So it is about benchmarking. It is about seeing benchmarking against your peers, benchmarking against your budget, your expectation. It is benchmarking against best practices, right? Are we living up to our service pledge? And how do you plan on sharing this, right? So there are many ways to share it. You can share it in videos, you can share it in social medias. Those are ways that you can talk to your creative teams. Great application for transparency, things like just, when you have a story that is backed by numbers, it is compelling, powerful when you talk to a grant application, right? In the past, you probably can only tell them a story without the numbers tied to it. But now you can. You are able to disclose, information that provide more depth, right? So no longer that you are able to just stitch on a story, but you're able to basically provide more insight into a story. And this helps when you're doing like social media campaigning and things like that. Some of the other ways could be including this into your annual report, for all your stakeholders. You can put it into your marketing event, kind of a strategy meetings for your staff. When you are planning for resource, when you're planning for next year, when you're doing resource management, and also it could be a good boost, a morale supporter for the staff to let them be aware of the performance and also the result. Right? Now, now the question about doing impact measurement is that it requires resources, right? and both in terms of time and in terms of human resources. That requires management commitment. So not only your board, your council, your management has to be on board of that, and you probably have to communicate it to the staff who are administrating collecting this data as well. And as I said, you have to be realistic. Because if you want to, there are so many data to collect. So it is important to go back to your drawing board. Against what we talked about earlier on in this session, it is important to know what is core to you, what is important to you, and be realistic about it. Now, I just wanted to repeat that output management is not just about donor. It's not just about getting attention from donors. It's good to have, it's good, important information, but it is also good to benchmark against yourself for your own management purposes, because you want to make sure that you're aligned. Whatever you're doing is really what your mission is calling for. Every 5-10 years you need to check on that. It helps you in terms of planning, You also increase your operational efficiency. Now, this comes to the end of my presentation, and I have some resources that get from SUSS. So let me hand it back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Yao. Right, and we are privileged today to have very distinguished speakers on our panel. Dr. Ang Hak Seng, Deputy Secretary of the Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth. Dr. Ang needs no introduction. At the start of the circuit breaker, he spearheaded the launch of the Charities Lean Forward webinar series. Thank you, Dr. Ang, for joining us today. And our next panelist is Mr. Tim Lee. Mr. Lee is the Executive Director of Caregiver Alliance. Tim has been with CAL, Caregiver Alliance, for close to 3 years, and during that short stint, he has transformed the organization and improved stakeholder engagement. Caregiver Alliance is also the winner of the 2019 Charities Governance Award for medium-sized charities. For many of us in nonprofit organizations, we know it is very difficult to be a recipient of the Charity Governance Award. And for CAL, the series of caregiver to caregiver training, as well as caregiver for caregiver support, have empowered and enabled many of the caregivers to step up and step out. So please join me to welcome our panelists with us. I'm glad to see the 3 speakers with me now on the screen. To get the ball rolling, maybe I could invite Dr. Ang to just give a quick reflection about measurements, about your quick takeaway from what Richard has shared. And then we'll move on to Tim.
Thank you, Caroline. Good afternoon, my brothers and sisters. I was struggling on to what to share, but I thought there's one thing that I'd like to touch upon, and that is the title of your discussion this afternoon, and that is donor management. I would prefer that instead you listen to me. I would like to listen to you by expressing to you what I felt will be the challenge of donor management during COVID-19. And I'll give you 5 very quick statements, but I want to test out your reaction. The first statement to tell you is donor is beyond money. Please do not think of donor as only money, but think of donor also include skill, times, and resources. So that's my first statement. My second statement to you is regarding to money. The challenge we have today in donor management is money not enough. You all know that it's difficult to raise funds at this moment. And in terms of time, I want to ask you to think about that our volunteers are concerned about their safety. So how? And in terms of skill, many of us are relying on skill volunteerism from company, but I want you to also remember that some of our company are on fire. And lastly, I want also you to think of new way of giving, and that is donation in kind. But I want you to think of the challenges it has. For example, things go bad. Food go bad very easily. So think of this as a challenge regarding to donation management or donor management now during COVID-19. And I'd like to have a dialogue with you on this later on. Thank you. I hand over to you, Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ang. Now, I see a lot of our alumni members from the earlier cohorts of the Certificate in High Performing Charities, people like Pat, Nilo, Hang Meng, Clarence, many of you. It's really a delight to see all of you. And many of you, especially those of you in the first 3 batches of our cohort, will remember the case we did, Caregiver Alliance and Teng On Song. Right, so I'm really privileged to also have on this panel Tim. So Tim, maybe I could get you to share with us a little bit about your experience in strategizing and engaging different segments of your donors as well as your funders and supporters.
Thanks for having me. When you first invited me, I was a bit worried because I'll be in the presence of Dr. Ang as well, and I'm so new to the sector. I'm not sure whether there's anything that I can really contribute. But thanks for the reassuring session we had together with Jaslyn and Karas, where you kind of pointed out that it's simply a time of sharing, and that's what I hope to do. I just want to share with you what I've experienced, but the qualifier is that I'm only a coming to 3-year-old baby in the social service sector. So yeah, this is really new to me. But I like what Dr. Ang said because it resonates. One of it was really interesting. You think about donor management beyond money, beyond donation. It is about skills, time, and resources. And that's so interesting because this is exactly what I was hoping to do. We just had our strategic planning meeting on Monday with the board. And one of the things that we are really looking at is this. CAL, we are 34% strong. We add another 2 since the last time COC visited us. So we are 34 strong now, but we can't do the work we need to do. It's really challenging. So how do we solve that problem? So it's exactly as you said, we need to depend on people or our supporters who can donate skills as well, donate their time. And maybe the third one that I'm not really thinking about, which you brought up, is what resources can they contribute? But it's very exciting because the thought I had was really this: if I cannot buy talents because I don't have money, then I need to borrow. I need to borrow people who are willing to lend me the talents to help me to think about problems I'm trying to solve. So, and by involving them, to me, actually that is really true. It's really part of engagement with our supporters. I think the broader word is supporters rather than just donors, because we think of money whenever we think of the word donation. So anyway, yeah, I fully agree with Dr. Ang. We need to think differently, especially the challenge we face now with COVID-19. And while we have challenges, I think it's also interesting because we also, when we are squeezed, we are forced to think out of the box and we come out with new ideas. So I think these are challenging times, but it's also great time for us to really think differently. And I hope to share with the audience here, 200 over of you, not just about this CAL thing and so on, but also something more recent. This year we had the Crime for Mental Wellness campaign. So it was totally different. If you just imagine this, in April, the board said we need to engage with our supporters, our donors. How do we do that? How do we tell them that we are still relevant, right, in the midst of COVID? Especially at that time, we couldn't do our one-to-one, face-to-face training in the hospital, community centers, and so on. We are kind of being booted out. So we are still not sure how can we stay relevant. So that was a challenge given to me. Within 1 month, I need to come up with something. But thankfully, it wasn't a problem because for CAL, we have always been thinking about what do we need to line up throughout the year so that we constantly engage with caregivers, and also beyond that, of course, our supporters, donors, and so on. So when the call was made, actually it was quite easy for us because at that time, we were trying to figure out this campaign that we call YOLO 2020. So by 2020, we are supposed to have completed our 18 months old campaign where we try to bring awareness about mental health using this idea of climbing up to Everest Base Camp. And we actually have gotten support from many corporates, IMH, and so on to join us on this expedition. But with COVID-19, the plans were turned upside down. So, but this thing that we are thinking about kind of spin off into this idea. Why don't we do a crime for mental wellness where we involve everybody? It's a virtual crime, it's not a real crime. But that makes it so much easier because anybody can participate. And that's what we launched. So over 6 weeks, we went on this crime together with all those who are keen to be part of this. And it was quite amazing because, and maybe here is where as I reflect, I promised Caroline that I will think about some things that I think might be useful for the rest of us here. What I realized is also this: sometimes we just need to be bold and set impossible target. Because if you never try, you never know, right? So that's what we did, no? And it's a kind of connecting the dot, because at that time, the government said that we'll do a one-to-one matching, right? So what was the amount? Maximum 250K. So I told my staff, they first came to me with a very, what we call smart goal kind of objective, because it's achievable. So I say, why do that? Government say 250K, if we raise 250K, let's go for 250K. And that's what we did. Was I confident we can do 250K? Absolutely not. But I was telling Caroline, actually that's a perfect excuse, because you set such a high goal. If you don't achieve it, nobody blame you. And that's what we did, right? And strangely, out of the 3 goals that we set, one was really about mobilizing 2,500 climbers. Second was about getting a total of 250 million steps together, right? But out of these 3, the 250K dollars was the one that we actually achieved. The rest are quite close, but it's okay. But the whole idea behind this is actually not because we want to raise money. The whole idea behind this was we want to be able to reconnect with our caregivers community, because we are really, really terrified for them. If you imagine during the COVID-19 circuit breaker period, we had calls from our caregivers. They have our numbers, they have the numbers of our staff, and they call us up, and out of the calls, there were 4 families that have lost a loved one who is suffering from mental health issues. They have lost their lives because of suicide. First 8 weeks of COVID-19. And it's understandable. They were used to being able to go to IMH and everywhere else for counseling, therapy, whatever. And suddenly all this was stopped. And being cooped up at home with their mental health issue, it was really a challenge. So we heard a lot of cases of police incidents in the family, physical abuse, and so on, where the loved one beat up the caregiver, and we were very concerned. And now with that challenge that families faces this life and death thing because of all this COVID-19 impact, it was really, really tough. So based on that, we kind of link everything up. It's like what Steve Jobs talked about, connecting the dots, But you can't connect the dots if the dots are not there in the first place. So we happen to have YOLO 2020 give us the idea of climbing. We were, because of COVID-19, we were faced with a challenge. We want to solve a problem that our caregivers need, and we'll focus on that. And then Topbot come along and say, I give you money, why not? So it kind of all connect together, and that was what happened. But I must be also very thankful, because we mounted the campaign in a very short time, because among my staff, I have a couple of people that I call them the eager beavers. Eager beavers? They are so keen to do something, to volunteer, to help, and they are so energized and so motivated, and that's what I had. So this campaign brought us about more than $500,000, including the 250K from Topbot, which hasn't come in yet, by the way. But anyway, the cost is only $85 because of an eager beaver who say, Tim, I can do it. And next day she put up the website, And when we face challenges along the way, we need to tweak things and we get feedback. Say, Tim, I can do it. And the next day she got it done for me. So this is the team I have, We assemble a very small team and we launched a campaign and we did it. I must say that it's not perfect. There are things we are still learning. If I have time, I would love to share it. But yeah, I think I better pass the time to Caroline, because if not, I'll just dominate the whole conversation. So back to you, Caroline, before I come back on again. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. So what you said really is about, tying back your campaign to your mission, right? Which ties in very nicely with what Richard reminded us, right? What is your mission? What is your organization mission? What is your value proposition? And what are the necessary measures to demonstrate that you are making an impact in the community? Right. So maybe at this point, just to get the ball rolling, because I haven't seen any questions yet from the chat. Just to get the ball rolling, maybe I could hear from Tim, Dr. Ang as well. How might one cultivate the relationship with our donors, our prospective donors, and how can we find out What motivates them? Besides them believing in our cause, right? What else would that be that motivates the donors and supporters of your organization? Tim, would you like to go first?
So I was in government service for 24 years. And actually, I was a bit alarmed by the word cultivate relationship. So, but anyway, I think what's more important is the word, understanding what really motivates supporters or donors. And I think that is really interesting. And I'm glad Professor Yap shared with us about, we had the questions, the survey, and yeah, he showed a list of why people are motivated to give. And I think that kind of helps. But what I want to share is this. Actually, donors are very different. They are different groups. So we need to be very clear who are we talking about here, because their motivations are very different. So I'd like to give an example of one group. So this is a group that funded us, and they said to us, maybe I get the words out because I got it prepared. I was actually like preparing for exam because I want to make sure I say the right thing. Okay, so there's this funder that we had, and they say this, well, take this money that we are giving you. Here are the KPIs, right? We talk about measurement, right? Here are the KPIs, report to us every month, meet us every 6 months. And then 8 months later, they came back to us and say, oh, by the way, we now have a new project manager, right? So please orientate, please discuss. And also, by the way, the director who sponsored your program, she has left, So this is one example of one of the donors that we have to manage or continue to build relationship with. But so in this case, what would I do? So I think Richard kind of said that, for a small charity like us, I think we are considered medium size actually, but I still think we are small. For a small charity like us, it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough to really set aside people, even myself, my time, to really go and find out and figure out what do our donors need, what motivates them. Here in this particular donor, it was okay because we came together to define what we need to deliver. And yeah, they are good because they teach us how to set outcome KPI, how to set output KPI, all that helps, right? And then after that is said, we just have to put in place everything. So we put up a CRM that help us monitor. We are able to generate reports, and every month we send them reports and so on. But the challenges is this, we are dealing with an organization here. So the reason why I bring out the example of how the project manager changed, the director changed, is because it's very difficult. What we think is the motivation that we understood during the negotiation now has changed, because we really don't know who is this new person that we need to speak to, what are their motivation. Of course, we can imagine as an organization, we quite understand what the organization wants to achieve, but what about the person directing the effort for this program? So it's quite, the question is quite interesting because for a small charity, we find it's very difficult to answer, but I think it's important. I'm so thankful for this session because it forces me to take time to reflect and ask pretty important questions that will kind of set the stage for CAL going forward. And I think it's important. Do I really know my donors? Do I know their motivation? And after knowing, how do I commit resource to engage with them, to better manage the relationship with them? So I'm learning as I think about this, and I would love to hear from the rest of you as well. What are your thoughts on this too? Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Dr. Ang? Yeah.
Thank you,
Go ahead.
Caroline. I listened to Richard and I listened to Tim, and if I may distill one word that has the highest leverage on donors, and it's this word called purpose. Many a times, donor will continue to give both skill, time, or resources, or money, provided they find that what you are doing are purposeful and meaningful. Not only purposeful and meaningful to you, but also purposeful and meaningful to them. I think the second part of the equation is something that we sometimes do not have enough understanding. Now, then the question is how? How do we ensure that what we are doing are purposeful to the donors? You will recall once upon a time, some 3 months ago, at this forum, we shared the way to make your donation purposeful through a framework we call the parent framework. Just a quick what I call revision. P stands for purpose, A stands for alignment, R stands for results, E stands for evidence, N stands for navigation, and T stands for transparency. Each of these letters will enable you so that whatever you are doing, the donor will find purpose in what you are doing. I don't want to go through the lecture again, but if any of you are interested, I understand that this lecture is still available on the net. Caroline can point you to it. But once a while, please go through and revise on it, because it's a very easy way of ensuring that what we do are purposeful and meaningful to the parents, to your donors. However, my brother and sister, I want you bring all to real life again. You recall that at my earlier session with you, again, once upon a time, I say that because of money not enough, we train you to go to raise fund online. And as I scanned through the list just now, I saw many of you have attended the online lecture. Part 1 of the lecture, I share with you the parent framework. Part 2 of the lecture, I share with you case study on using the parent framework. Let me tell you what is the part 3 of the lecture in a very short way, because I'm not supposed to conduct lecture anymore. I mean, I'm here only invited as an invited guest. Part 3 of the lecture is this. I find that for those of you who have great capabilities, especially those with big charities, you are able to tell a very good story. Because you are able to tell a very good story online, you have more donations. Small charity, on the other hand, because you are not the best storyteller, and because you do not have the expertise and people to help you to market it, you are not getting your fair share of the online fundraising. And I want to be very open about it. Okay, the market is getting, instead of creating an online marketplace, I start to see money going to where people can tell better story. So how do we in a small charity overcome this? Again, I have 3 advice for you. My first advice is, please continue to attend, and this especially this time, continue to build up your capabilities in storytelling, regardless of whether it's online or offline, because only then will you be able to help the donor to see that what you are doing are purposeful and meaningful. And story is a very powerful way of doing it. Number 2, please make use of the shared services. Small charity in particular, it doesn't make sense for you to employ a marketing officer. You don't have economy of scale. But make use of the shared services that we have established, so that the shared services will actually give you free advice to tell a better story, so that you are entitled to your fair share of online fundraising. Third, donor management is not only about when people give you money, but more importantly is after people give you money, what do you do? A good example is, many of us, when they give us money, we write letter and thank them. But did you write letter to also tell them at the end of after what you have done, how does that impact the beneficiary? Write the letter after you have finished everything and tell them what are the impact. Why? Because this is called account management. We are shifting away from donor management, by the way, in particular. We are shifting away from transactional donor management to relational donor management. And in this term, we like to call it account management. Then you all will say, oh, account management mean more permanent staff. No. Many of your volunteers have these skills in account management. Who said volunteer cannot manage volunteer? In fact, I dare to tell you, volunteer is even a better account management than your regular staff because they are one of them. All right, so my brothers and sisters, I want to bring you back to the old story of the parent framework, and I found it very useful in making sure that whatever we do at the end of the day are meaningful and purposeful to everyone. Caroline, thank you.
Caroline, if I
Thank
may
you, Dr.
add,
Ang. Yes, please, Richard, go ahead.
I totally agree with what Dr. Ang was talking about. I think the parent framework, I heard it for the first time, but it is it basically relates to what we just shared earlier on. Having a mission, purposeful, and I think what Dr. Ang talked about in terms of storytelling being the most powerful means to communicate to donors, I think that's without question. But I think what I was just trying to support is actually what he was talking about. How is your money, donor, being impactful, right? So if you can tell a story, but you can say, well, because of your donation, thank you very much, and we are able to achieve X number of program, and this is how many kids that has actually been benefited out of it. So this, as it says, it become more relational. There is a purpose behind it. I noticed that in the question, someone was asking about qualitative information. Is it relevant? It is absolutely relevant in this case. Data are both quantitative and qualitative. Storytelling as good a qualitative measurement. In fact, some of the longer term outcomes, such as hope, transformation in the life, those are very hard to quantify, right? So if you can weave that into your storytelling, it becomes a lot more powerful to whoever you're sharing this with. Thank you, Caroline.
Thanks, Richard. I want Tim to share his climb for mental wellness and how he put the stories together. So Tim, as you collect your thoughts, I just can't help but want to share one story to just reaffirm this point about storytelling, because it actually ties in very nicely with the two questions that we have from Christopher as well as from Kwek Chun. Now this story is it is actually amongst us. I'm not sure how many of you have been there, but I recently had the privilege of visiting Zuchi Ta'ai Gallery in Sembawang. And if you have a chance to visit that gallery, you will realize that every piece of item that is put in there actually has a story. And the stories are told to the volunteers, and the volunteers tell the next group of volunteers, and it goes on and on and on. And that is how Zuchi reinforced the values amongst that 3,500 volunteers they have in Singapore, nationwide. So there are very small things. It can be 3 cabbages, it can be sacks of rice, but everyone underscores the value. And if you ask any Zuchi volunteer, they will be able to tell you that story. So that story not only helps them to cultivate the values amongst their volunteers, it also helps them to reinforce what they stand, what they mean to the public, to their donors, to their supporters, to their advocates. Yeah, so over to you, Tim. I want to hear your story so that you can tell everyone about how you weave things together for Climb for Mental Wellness.
You're asking for trouble because I got a lot of stories. But before that, I want to tell a story too about an experience I had. So this is talking about how we communicate to the public and donors. So 2019, I think, we hosted an event for MOH, where we invited a couple of charities to come together to have focus group discussion with MOH. And there was a media interview arranged. So CAL was selected. There was another charity that was selected. So we went first. So me and my colleague, we talk about CAL, our mission, our vision, what we have achieved, the measurements and so on, that we can be trusted, you know. And then the next person who came to the camera was a lady, and she was from another charity, and she told her story, right? A very personal story. And she cried during the telling of the story. Next morning, guess which organization was featured in channel news? I mean, in the TV, mainstream. It's not CAL, it's the storyteller, right? So sometimes, yes, we throw all these evidences, but I don't know whether donors really bother, because when they first give, they are roughly clear about why they are donating, right? And then you feed them information. This year we accomplished this, this is our measurement and so on. I personally think that it is not as impactful as telling stories, yeah. And in fact, this is what I have been, we at CAL has been working on, not on our own, exactly as what Dr. Ang said. We couldn't manage that. We don't have the budget to make productions of videos that tell the caregiver stories. But we had this all along in our mind, and this is where we connect back to C4MW, Crime for Mental Wellness. So we were actually also trying to tell the public out there the stories of caregivers, the stories of people who suffer from mental illnesses, the stigma they face, and the story of how COVID-19 has an especially bad impact on them. And actually, that is the story that we wanted to communicate. Yeah. So we took the opportunity to also tell the story of how CAL is trustworthy. Thanks to MCCY, we won the Charity Governance Award, right? So, but that one we try not to talk too much. We just put the logo there, you know, and that's good enough. But we were telling stories like this with a purpose, to win trust, to tell them that there's a tremendous need out there. And actually, what helped was that we didn't do this right from, let's say, the time we started the campaign. The storytelling, the gathering of story happens long time back. So in the way we do our annual reports, sure, we give the measurements reports, right? KPI met, not met, are we improving? But we also give stories about, you know, what's been happening because of CAL, how lives are being touched, people are being helped, and so on. And because of that, we have amassed quite a lot of stories, you know, some of which we put inside our website. The stories are there. Some are video form, some are written form. And when we went into the campaign, C4MW, we just took those resources, we plug it in to this campaign website, which is a second website. But our intent was very clear. We just want to tell the story, that this is the world of caregiving. Please sit up and notice. And there's a reason why we did that. The reason is because at that time, everybody was focused on one story, the plight of the immigrant workers in Singapore, correct? All the publicity, the heart's concern was directed there. And guess where the money were going to, right? So I'm perfectly fine with that, because I think this is a very, very important need that we need to highlight in our society. But that's a challenge for charities out there, right? Not only is the pie getting smaller, but some causes will dominate for the different time in our history. So in this case, yeah, it happened to be the immigrants. It happened to be the people with disability, because our president was supporting that. So for me, I was also quite concerned, because I also feel that our story about caregivers is very important. And it's a real story. Can you imagine your family being completely devastated because your loved one, someone you've been caring for, has taken their life because of suicide? Why shouldn't this story be told as well, right? And so we wanted to tell their stories too, right? And the worst thing is this, you know, when you look at a caregiver, they are actually invisible. You can't see them, because in the workplace, they are just working there, but you don't know they are caregivers. We call them hidden heroes, because they they are caring for somebody, but they don't want people to know. There's a mental stigma. So they are not visible. Are they vulnerable? I tell you, they are very vulnerable. We hear of our caregivers who themselves went into IMH. They are vulnerable, but they are not visible, right? And they are doing good, but no, we are not telling their story. So this whole campaign is also about telling the stories and also inviting people out there to be involved, to be aware first, but to see how they can help. So how can they help? This is where we talk about, well, you can donate a step, right? You contribute a step to meet the target. Of course, you can donate money or you can donate both, right? But the truth is this: if you examine our communication in the 6 months of campaign, we actually didn't ask for money because we are also conscientious of something. We know that many businesses are hurt. We know that many people are out of job. And in fact, in the early months, people already suffer a pay cut reduction. So I don't want to talk too much about money as well. But thankfully, what we did was we wrote to a specific targeted group, the institutional donors, right? High value individuals who have supported us in the past. We wrote to them personalized letter explaining this, why are we doing this, why they need to hear us and how can they help, right? And thankfully, out of that, the regular supporters, the institutional donors contributed the bulk of the $280,000, right? And just actually the truth is only 4 institutional donors, what they gave made all the difference, right? Almost 70%, right? So what the assumption we had was correct. Many of our regular donors, they couldn't give, or they are giving already maybe to the immigrant workers. It's okay, right? But what helped us was the institutional donors or supporters. And for them, we have been telling them for the longest time what we are doing. They understand what we are doing. In fact, let me just jump and say that I have a dream. I hope to secure this donor. No? But before I describe this ideal donor, I want to describe an actual donor that has been supporting us for many years. Binjai Tree, our founding institution. So I remember what they said to me. Again, I kind of remember it, but I want to refer to my text again. And this is what they say. Tim, take this money. Take this money. You're doing a good job. We trust in you. Let me know if you need more help. I'll see what I can do and who else I can bring in to support the work. Now, this organization has been supporting many other charities, right? But this is what they said to me. Let me know. Just raise your hand. We'll go and find for you other resources. This is wonderful, isn't it? This is a donor that really understood. And they understood because actually they are direct beneficiaries. These are people who have benefited from, they've seen how this has benefited themselves or their people that are immediate to them, his friends and so on. So they believe in the purpose of CAL, exactly as what Dr. Ang said. But now I tell you what is the ideal donor that I'm looking for, and I'm still searching for him or her or the organization. And this is what the ideal donation or donor will say to me. Cal, please take this money, use it well, make it work. Let me know when your service model is stable and you're ready to expand and grow. We have the money and we'll invest in your organization when you're ready to step up and to do more for your beneficiaries. I'm looking for this donor who believe in us, who have the means to support us so that we can grow, so that we can serve more people, our beneficiaries, right? Very hard to find, but I'm hoping that we can find these beneficiaries, right? So yeah, the storytelling, the accountability, the account management part of things, these are all wonderful ideas. And yeah, I'm also taking up the ideas and seeing how we can implement them for CAL in the next stage. But I really hope that we find supporters who really understand what this is all about. Because the work before us is really challenging for CAL. Again, let me tell my stories to the 200 over audience now. My opportunity, right? So we have been helping in the last 8 years, 5,000 caregivers through our program. and they have benefited from it. Just now I heard from Commissioner of Charity that his wife also attended a dementia program that we have just started recently. I can tell you confidently, if you want to, please come and sit in at our graduation ceremony. It works, right? But 5,000 in 8 years, is that something to shout out for, about? It's not. You know what's the number before us? 1 out of 7 person in Singapore will experience a mental health condition in their lifetime. OCD, schizophrenia, severe depression, whatever, so many. 1 out of 7. What is 1 out of 7? Right? If there are 5.69 million of us here in Singapore, right? The number is actually 821,000 people. These are people who suffer from mental health issue at some point in their lifetime. But you look at, when one person suffers from mental illness, how many people are involved in caring for him or her? Caregivers, easily 3 times. So the numbers before us are tremendous. I'm telling you, I can't sleep at night, honestly speaking, because I'm wondering how can we reach the numbers? 5,000 in 8 years versus 821,000 out there waiting for us to help them. How to do it, right? And then they are all hidden, right? Nobody knows about them. So yeah, the challenge before us is great, and I'm looking for new ways of doing things that is different, and maybe really soliciting for more help. Maybe not just from donors out there, but from our fellow charities out there. Are there opportunities we can combine our effort, do things together? So if your beneficiaries are undergoing treatment at your centers and the caregivers have nothing to do, maybe invite us. We can run a mental awareness, self-care training for them. We are happy to collaborate. But our desire is very simple. Our purpose is very simple. We are here to train, support, and help caregivers. So I hope, and in this call, I hope to call out and say that please, don't see us as a competitor. Help us make this goal realizable, right? 800,000. We can share the pie, You take 200,000, that's fine. We'll just chuck on and do what we can from what we have, the resources we have. So thank you very much, and I think I'll just stop here.
Thank you, Tim. Is there any comments that we will have from Richard or Dr. Ang? No? Okay, so please allow me to attempt to wrap up. There are only 3 things actually. There was a question about what are the 3 most important one must do to attract new donors, and what would that be, right? So hearing from Tim, Dr. Ang, as well as Dr. Yap, I would wrap it up in these PMS. P stands for purpose and mission. Knowing very well what your organization purpose is, what your mission stands for, right? And what M is amongst your donors, your supporters, even your volunteers, your advocates, what motivates them? What motivates a corporate donor to support your organization? What motivates an individual donors to give to your organization? And amongst them, you can even further segment them by different motivation, right? And the third S is stories. Stories are the qualitative information, and you can't help but have to build stories as part of your operation. So you continuously amass lots and lots of stories that you can use for any purposes, for any engagement, for any time you are communicating with your members. Yep. Before we end, I know there are still some questions that many of you might have. If there are questions specific to MCCY Charities Unit, this is the email address that you can send your email to. And if you have any interest that you would like about our SUSS programs and courses for the nonprofit sector, please feel free to contact myself or my colleague Jaslyn. We'll be happy to take your questions over email or even speak to you over the phone. And then last but not least, your feedback matters to us. It will help us to produce more webinars that is relevant to you, relevant to your context. And if I don't see you soon, I would like to take this opportunity to wish every one of you a Merry Christmas, a wonderful new year ahead, and may 2021 bring each of us better health, stronger families, and happier communities. Goodbye. Thank you all very much.